Corey Graves said on his recent podcast that Bobby Heenan, he feels like Bobby Heenan would potentially get cancelled in 2021, Finn. He said that a lot of people think 2021, the days of the full-blown heel commentator are passé. He definitely agrees with that. So he goes on to talk about it. But Finn, what do you think? Corey Graves says that Bobby Heenan, if he was around today, he would get cancelled for some of the stuff that he would say. Do you think that's true? Is Heenan someone who could work in 2021 if somehow we were able to, go in a DeLorean and bring him into this year?
I don't think so. No, I don't think he would have worked. I mean, he didn't really work in WCW as a commentator, and towards the end, it was pretty sad listening to him. He wasn't having a good time there. He didn't like working for WCW. Didn't like the direction of the company, but his enthusiasm for the job had waned. It was severely depleted. And he became famous really around sort of 94, 95 for his dated references. It's like, I remember one time after Hogan came in, he made a reference to Hogan's Heroes, which was like a TV show that I think was big right at the end of the 60s. I think it was like that. It was either end of the 60s or very early 70s that show was on. It was like a more than 20-year-old reference. And he didn't really seem to keep up with the names of moves or characters. And he was just out there winging it week in, week out. And if you go back to say, to me, he's probably his best commentary performance, and this isn't a controversial pick, was Royal Rumble 92. Mm-hmm. I'm sure you will agree with that, Kenny.
Yeah. There's a great moment in that match where he, Roddy Piper, so obviously Flair's in the Rumble, he's on Flair's side, and Roddy Piper comes out and he ends up like helping get somebody off of Flair or something. That was what he was doing. And as soon as Piper did that, Heenan said, "I'm sorry I ever called it a skirt. It's a kilt. It's a kilt. It's a beautiful kilt, you Scottish man." And then as soon as Roddy Piper hit Flair, he was like, "You no good skirt wearing freak," and just immediately turned on him. It was such a good call.
But he was so sharp then. He was with it, and you could see that he had something to prove still. And I think you fast forward to 95, 96, and it's just, to me, he's relying on cliches. He's not bringing any original material to his commentary performance. He's not, you can see, and certainly, when they brought in Rey Mysterio and Psychosis, Eddie Guerrero and all these people who had this, modern style, to Heenan, it was like, well, what's this? This isn't wrestling. He grew up on, getting heat and, cheap heat and all the other things that he did. That wasn't his style of wrestling. But as far as the things he would say in like, early 90s or late 80s when he was the manager, or even you go back obviously to the 60s, he was a manager working in, for Dick the Bruiser and then the AWA, and did some short stint for Ole Anderson in Georgia. That didn't end very well. But, he was using terms and phrases and he was saying things that were acceptable at the time that you obviously couldn't say now. I mean, society in the 60s, 70s and 80s and even into the 90s and even into the 2000s, as we know from covering the Attitude Era, Raws and Smackdowns and pay-per-views, Kenny, on their Patreon.
Yeah.
20 years ago, they were saying and doing things that you couldn't get away with now. So Corey Graves is absolutely right. Is that the Heenan in his prime in the 80s would make disparaging comments about women that you could never get away with saying in 2021.
No.
And he would make comments about, people in general, about that, just use language that would be unacceptable today. I mean, I guess if he was younger, he would modify his act and make it suitable for 2021. So maybe what I'm saying is totally unfair. It's like, well, if a young Bobby Heenan came along, it would be a very different, Bobby the Brain to the one that we remember from the 80s and the 90s. So maybe it would work. But certainly the Heenan of that era that Graves grew up with, and, I remember watching when I first started watching American wrestling. No, it couldn't exist in today's wrestling. Well, what do you think, Kenny?
No, I don't think he could work in today's wrestling. But it's funny because I was when I read this, I was thinking about MJF a little bit, and he does get away with saying some stuff that I just would never think that anybody would get away with saying. Whether it's the stuff about Melanie Pillman or whether it's the stuff about Lex Luger, But then again,
Yeah.
he's a heel, and he's coming out for a segment and doing his thing and having a match, or whatever, and then he's going away. Whereas with Heenan, he was on commentary all the time, and I do think, like you say, I mean, we've seen how Twitter can pick things up if you say something in the wrong way.
Yeah.
And I just think, I mean, we see Jim Ross, God bless him, trying to remember the pronouns of Sonny Kiss when Sonny Kiss is wrestling. And, it's like, I think Bobby Heenan today, some of the banter that he would try to have would just probably not work.
Yeah.
And I think if a young Bobby Heenan came around today, I don't think the commentary system would support the freedom he would need to be as good as he would have been, if that makes any sense.
Yeah,
So.
I agree with that. Yeah, it would be a completely different character, and he wouldn't have got over like he did, but it would have been palatable for a 2020 audience, and wouldn't have been lighting Twitter up, every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Tuesday night, or whatever night it was on TV commentating. But yeah, he would have had to be drastically different to the Heenan we remember in order to exist on TV today.